Welcome back to another edition of Research Fantasy Presents NBA Fantasy Baller DFS edition for Tuesday, March 28th, 2017. We will be bringing you our three favorite plays for tournament action tonight. Last night, I would say, was a bit of a mixed bag, and really when you get 2 out of 3 of your core plays and you're not using ownership percentages of over 50% of those players, it should be better than it was. Ultimately, Drew Holiday came through with 36 fantasy points on DraftKings. At his price, $6,700, I'll gladly take 36 fantasy points. Rudy Gobert had another monster game. He's just been an absolute force down the stretch. But Kyrie Irving, 13 points in the first quarter. And the Cavs were down by 10 points. But if you know how the Cavs rotation works, you know that LeBron comes in to start the second quarter. And he might have come in at the end of the first quarter too. I don't think so. But anyway, the rotation usually works so that LeBron comes in with the second unit, plays like 6 minutes, maybe 8 minutes, sits for 2 minutes, comes back on the floor. So I thought everything would be good. The Cavs would get back into it. You know, they're fighting to keep that number one spot. They're fighting to show that they're actually a good basketball team. And they just got run over. And that 13 points Kyrie assembled in the first quarter actually went backwards throughout the duration of the rest of the game. So that was really disappointing. I really had Kyrie pegged for around a 45-point night, which is 7.9 on DraftKings, which is basically the pricing I'm using. That's where I'm playing but most of my action. Would have been a great night. Still made it out okay. Will absolutely admit that it was not a winning night, despite having high ownership of pretty low-owned plays like Kristaps, like Corey Joseph, like Carmelo Anthony, but ultimately things just did not come together due to Kyrie Irving. Taking a look at our model for tonight, here are some of the names that pop up as being good tournament plays. Stephen Curry, Draymond Green, Paul George, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Gorgie Jang, Chris Middleton, Andrew Wiggins, Greg Monroe, James Harden, Tim Hardaway Jr., Ersan Ilyasova, which at $6K on DraftKings, I'm just not really tempted to pay that price, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. My three favorite plays for the slate in tournaments. Let's start off with Kemba Walker, 14-7 fantasy draft, 7,800 FanDuel, 8K on DraftKings. He's getting that home matchup that we much prefer him in. He's starting to round back into form after a few disappointing games. The Hornets will be taking on the Milwaukee Bucks, which is actually not the most exciting matchup that they could possibly get. But it's one that I think that they could still stay competitive in. The Bucks are really making a surge, making some noise down the stretch, much due to the fact that Giannis and Chris Middleton are on and off with one another, so that someone's always playing well enough in the game that the team can stay competitive. Have some very serious questions about what the combination of Malcolm Brogdon and Matthew Dellavedova will be able to do to keep Kemba Walker in check. Think he's a good bet to exceed the 40-point mark tonight, and that's why I will have pretty good ownership on him in my tournament lineups. Next up, we have Dennis Schroeder, 14-4 fantasy draft, 7,200 FanDuel, 7,800 DraftKings, and I've got my fingers crossed that people see that $7,800 on DraftKings, have their eyes pop out of their head at the fact that they might have to pay $8K for Dennis Schroeder and move on somewhere else. Unfortunately, for those who do watch box scores, he's going to show two big games over 43, 44, maybe even over 45 fantasy points on DraftKings, which is likely to drive his ownership percentage up. I think there's going to be somewhat of a counterbalancing. I think that there's going to be people who see Schroeder, the name, and just say, nope, not paying 78. People will box score watch and combat that. I'm fine with paying it. I'm hoping people think it's just too high. I know that a lot of people, even some pretty sharp people in the industry, will pass on players because they don't see the upside of a player. But ultimately, like my general rule is, you don't need every single one of your players to hit 6 or 7x value on DraftKings. If Schroeder comes through and even hits 42 fantasy points, 40 fantasy points, late 30 fantasy points, it's all about the lineup construction around him. He could hit 5x or even 4.5x. But if the assembly of the lineup you have around him compensates for that, there's a good chance he could end up on the winning lineup. So Phoenix, one of the top matchups across the board, but especially at the point guard position. So there's nothing that's going to keep me away from Dennis Schroeder ownership tonight. Perhaps my favorite tournament play tonight is going to be Karl-Anthony Towns going up against Miles Turner and his inability to defend the position. We're paying $18K on Fantasy Draft, $10.5 on FanDuel, $10.1 on DraftKings. And like I said, a lot of what I'm talking about is specifically pertaining to DraftKings, and that price is just too low for someone who I do feel like has a 50-point floor in this matchup. Towns, just an awesome basketball player. Miles Turner, good offensive player, really still struggles a lot on the defensive end and with rebounding with good rebounders. This is a game where I could see Cat putting up 29, 18, 4 assists, couple of steals, a couple of blocks. I could see him getting into 60, 65-point territory tonight. You're paying a fraction of what you're going to pay for James Harden, and while I don't see Towns having 80-point upside, I do think he's one of those other guys that could get to Harden-like production at a $2,000 savings. That'll wrap it up for tonight. Once again, our top tournament plays for the day are Kemba Walker, Dennis Schroeder, and Karl-Anthony Towns. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Head over to researchfantasy.com. Sign up for our NBA mailing list. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Research and Win. And join us again tomorrow.